Watch the Atheist Experience live Sundays at 4:30 p.m. Central. Visit tiny.cc/YTAXP and call into the show at 512-991-9242 or connect to the show online at tiny.cc/callaxp.
It's time to get sexy on Secular Sexuality.
Hello, and welcome to Secular Sexuality, the ACA show that loves every bit of you just the way you are. My name is Christy Powell. Tonight's guest is Licensed Professional Counseling Associate and Fat Liberator. Welcome, JP Cardenas.
Hello. How are you?
Hey, super excited to have you here.
Excellent.
Tonight, we are going to be wrapping our head around the health at every size model, raising our fists for fat liberation, and hugging ourselves for personal healing. So, give us a call with your stories and questions. We're at 512-991-9242, or you can try tiny.cc/callsex because the show is coming right now. All right. Well, JP, you and I have known each other for a couple of years now, but so that the audience can get a chance to know a little bit about what you're about, can you tell us what's got you turned on this week?
Sure. So I'm really excited because I actually just learned of this app probably about 4 weeks ago. It's called the Moan app. So
Moan,
M-O. M-O with the little tilde, I think it is, N. The Moan app is an inclusive app to talk about sex very openly. It is inclusive of everybody. It is actually specifically only by voice. You're not on camera. They actually do live rooms, and they have people from all around the world talking about anything from, BDSM to fetishes to kink to poly relationships. I mean, and anything and everything in between.
Yeah, help me understand. When you say talking about, like, do we put this behind the curtain at the video store? Like, what does talking about BDSM through the Moan app really look like?
So, I mean, honestly, it's a little bit of everything. So you have people who will go on there and actually be educators and talking about specific topics and how to do things safely, consently, how to actually do it, and so forth. Or you'll have people just talking about their live experiences, a fetish that they've tried for the first time, a new relationship that they've gotten into, I mean, and everything in between. And I think that's what's really cool about it is you can go there for education, you can go there for fun, and just to learn.
Yeah, all right. So like a forum, but voice only.
Yep, a forum, but voice only, which a lot of people like because, being on camera can be very, difficult or scary or whatever.
I understand.
So yeah, it's a really, really cool, inclusive, fun app. I've really been enjoying it. I've been getting on and listening to doctors talking, sex workers talking, people who are just, for the first time, getting out of their quote-unquote vanilla lifestyle and trying something new. So it's been really fun.
Yeah, well, glad to hear it. I'll tell you what, I usually don't get to do these, but since it's just you and I tonight, I don't know how many years in a row I can really get away with this, but I have to say again, what's turning me on this week is the new season of Big Mouth.
Yes.
I understand that the raunchy adult cartoon is not for everybody, and I know I fit a certain demographic, but I love this show. It does make me laugh, but it is such good normalizing, educating material around sexuality. Like the vagina shame episode that they did this year was absolutely excellent. I would encourage everybody who has ever felt weird or gross about their body or somebody else's body, which is, I think, all of us, to absolutely check it out. So let me encourage people to take a look at Big Mouth and the Moan app.
Awesome. Yeah, that sounds great.
All right. Well, let's go ahead and jump into it. It's been a little while since we've talked about the health at every size movement on this show. Can you catch the audience up to speed on what HAZE actually means?
Yeah, so the Health at Every Size movement is really geared towards helping people have a better, healthier relationship with their body, specifically in the medical field. In the medical field, we see a lot of fat shaming. We see a lot of doctors who are always pushing people to lose weight, saying that their weight is what's causing all of their illnesses. And the Health at Every Size movement is really geared towards trying to make it to where people feel comfortable. People can go to a doctor, talk to somebody who is inclusive, safe, judgment-free, and so forth, to make it to where it's not just about weight. And this is something that I've truly enjoyed because it's not just doctors who are getting into this. You see doctors, therapists, nutritionists, you see exercise specialists, and a little bit of everybody really starting to get into this movement to provide that better education and advocacy work.
Yeah. No, it's beautiful and important work. Look, I know that you yourself are not a doctor, and honestly, I would encourage anybody who is watching YouTube to maybe explore a little bit deeper on their own personal medical advice. But, that being said, and getting that out of the way, I think the criticism is going to be, isn't this just encouraging people to ruin their health by telling them to eat whatever they want and to be careless?
That is such a common misconception about this.
Sure.
I've heard people say oh, you're encouraging people to be fat. Oh, you're encouraging people to be unhealthy. That is not exactly what this movement is about at all.
And not the same thing, right?
Exactly. Yeah, no, not the same thing at all. A lot of people put weight and health together. They see fat people as being unhealthy and a number of other things, but that's not the case. So many people can be fat and healthy. So many people can be skinny and unhealthy. So weight does not equal whether or not you're healthy or not. And with this specific movement, it's not telling people, go get fat. It's not telling people just eat anything and everything you want. It's really just a awareness around understanding how fat bodies are in the environment and the world around us, how people see them, how medical providers treat them, and how people, really just have a lot of shame and guilt around it and trying to get away from that.
Yeah, well, so then, again, without getting too deep into the medical aspects of it, what can we say about the connection between health and weight?
Oh, goodness. So, obviously, again, I'm not a doctor, but if you do some research about just kind of the medical field in general, you see that there's been quite a bit of studies and education around weight, but specifically weight for skinny white people. That's where the textbooks have gone. That's what we've studied. That's what we've kind of based everything.
What everything has been normed off of is this very specific population.
Exactly. And so therefore, because of that, we see people who are in fat bodies, people of color, people who are all different shapes and sizes are then automatically deemed as unhealthy because they don't fit into this kind of stereotypical ideal body type that they've been studying for so long. And so that's why we really start to have a lot of the issues around, weight loss and, shame and guilt and whatnot because of it. But yeah, that's kind of because of that historical understanding of weight. That's what we continue to see today and what doctors still use. And that's why we see such a problem. And that's why everybody says fat equals unhealthy.
Right. And it's, probably goes without saying, but as therapists, we really do have to kind of say the quiet part out loud to point out that shame that so many people experience is, if nothing else, a huge barrier to changing your weight or to just managing your health in general.
Oh, 100%. I'm constantly having to talk about, once we get to a place of working towards fat liberation, which we're going to talk about, why society has created these labels and how these labels are just so harmful to us. It does more damage than it does good.
Sure. Well, I mean, frankly, I know that there are a lot of folks who are going to drop out of this conversation right now and just run to the comments section to declare all of this like some sort of scientific fraud. What can you say about the sort of moralizing, judgmental fervor, honestly, that comes around weight and how we talk about it in our culture?
Oh my goodness. When it comes to that, what I think of are just a number of different things. When we hear doctors talk about weight loss all the time, and that also just go into other environments as well, then people really start to feel shame. People don't want to change then. We see people giving up power, people trying to take power from people and continue to oppress fat people. We see a lot happen to a person's psyche, their body, the way that they view their life, the way that they view relationships. I mean, it's literally just a spiral of things that end up happening. And as a therapist, that's something that, I have to face not only how the individual sees it and how the individual is going about their life, but then also how society is doing it as well.
Yeah.
Because not only do we have to help the individual, but as therapists, we have to work and help society.
Yeah. So it's in a lot of ways not the case that being fat in and of itself is harmful to your health for many, many people, but that being a fat person in this culture can then be really problematic for your health.
Exactly. It's the culture which is extremely toxic to fat people.
Why do you think there is such vitriol? We don't necessarily we might kind of thumb our noses at somebody who is smoking outside of a bar, and we like to get judgy on everything that we can, but there is something about fat folks that really does seem to draw a lot of ire.
Yeah, I think that's because in society we've put on a pedestal what we should look like. You need to be tall, skinny. For a female presenting body, tall, skinny, you need to have curves. That is what's desirable. That is what's healthy looking. For, people who present as men, you have to have that, upside down triangle build. You have to be very manly. You have to be the right size, etc. And because of that, and we see that not only in the medical field, we see that in entertainment, we see that in sports, we see that in fashion, we see it everywhere. That message is then ingrained into us and says yo, you can't be anything else but, and if you are anything else but this, you're not desirable, you're not wanted, you're not lovable, etc.
Yeah, so unlovable very quickly turns into some need to have an explanation, because we don't feel good about just hating people for no reason. So we kind of create this moralizing panic about, I'm concerned for your health.
Right. Exactly. And people think that, if they take that route of, I'm just really concerned about your health. Well, it's not really about your health, because what they're saying is that you, the person, because of your size, again, not desirable, it's unhealthy, et cetera.
Yeah. I mean, it's worth pointing out that you can't judge somebody's health and well-being just by looking at them, and yet we really do make that assumption. I mean, fat people face a lot of discrimination in our culture. Can you talk to us at all about the pressure that comes from that more well-meaning, health and safety kind of lens?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I mean, myself as a fat person, this is something that I've had to deal with all throughout my life, something I continue to deal with and continue to work on. And so, when I'm going about my life every single day, I'm constantly reminded of these things. Everywhere I look, books, magazines, movies, music, fashion, who knows? I'm constantly told and shown, this is what you need to look like. And if I don't look like this, then this is what you're, not wanted and whatnot. So yeah, it gets really difficult. And then as a therapist, being able to hold space for my clients, as well as understanding how I've gone through it myself and I continue to go through it, really makes a big difference for the work that I do.
Yeah, well, I mean, we did an episode a couple of years back called, Yes, We Said Fat. But, I think we've already used that word some 15 or 20 times in the last 15 minutes. So in case anyone who's listening is a little bit uncomfortable, can you talk about what is destigmatizing, what is healthy and appropriate language on this topic?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm going to kind of start with another example. So I openly identify as a queer, fat, Mexican American, and a number of other things. But when I use the word queer, a lot of people have a tendency to kind of,
Sure. Yeah. It's been used as a slur for a lot of folks.
When I was younger and I was coming to terms with my sexuality, queer was constantly used in a negative way to hurt people. And so over time, what has happened is in the LGBTQ plus community, we have taken that word back as a sense of power, as a sense of identity, as a sense of authenticity. Mm-hmm. And so with taking that word back and using it in more of the positive light instead of a derogatory, discriminatory way, it's really changed how people start to see the queer community, how people interact and talk with the queer community. Same thing with the word fat. I've been called fat all my life in a very derogatory, discriminatory way. And let me tell you, that hits you, right? It hits you hard. But then when I started taking that word back and saying, fat is just a descriptor, right? Mm-hmm. Fat is not, it doesn't mean anything else but describing what my body looks like. That really changes my lens and the way that I view that word. And then when people use it against me, it doesn't hurt me as much. But that's also because of the journey that I've been on, the work that I've done for myself. Yeah. Now, everybody is where I am, but everybody is on a journey. And so I think that by taking that word back and using it in more of a positive light as a descriptor, not using it in a negative, discriminatory way, it really starts to change the way people see it, both who identify as fat and who are not.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's telling, isn't it? Like the way we as a society think about that term, because if we were to say like, oh, she's standing over there next to the tall guy, next to the short guy, then if we say something like next to the black guy or next to the Mexican guy, some of us start to feel a little uncomfortable because we've used that term in such a negative way. Exactly. And so to then say, oh, well, she's standing next to the fat guy, that opens up a whole uncomfortable can of worms for so many of us.
Oh, it really does. And I mean, the fact that language has been used in such a targeting way to hurt people, whereas we can take language back and use it in such a positive light, in such an affirming and validating way, then people start to change the way that they use it. Maybe not everybody, but a lot of people start to then feel really just more authentically themselves, and they feel okay with those words. Mm-hmm. It doesn't take their power away. It doesn't take who they are away.
Yeah. Well, so can you talk to me a little bit about some of these like more maybe medicalized terms? I mean, when we say things like obese and, that term morbidly obese, I don't know if you want to talk about BMI and some of the junk science there, but how should we as a culture be thinking about these more like medical-ish terms?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I myself am considered morbidly obese. My BMI is, like 50% or something like that. But that in and of itself does not decide or is an indicator of my health. Mm-hmm. I'm still a healthy person. BMI in and of itself, when it comes to the way that doctors have been using it, is again, they've used it for to understand a platform of like, this is for white, skinny people. This is what BMI, quote unquote, should look like. Mm-hmm. And this is what deems a person to be healthy. Because it's only been used and started off with, tall, skinny white people, it doesn't really go into understanding people who have different ethnicities, different cultures, people's, their different, words all of a sudden, their genetics and like things like that, right?
Sure, yeah.
And so BMI is really just a simple way to just say, you're fat and unhealthy. Like, it doesn't give anything else in terms of an actual person's diagnosis, what their ailments are, or anything like that. It's just kind of a shaming thing to do most of the time.
Yeah, and I mean, on a certain level, that almost feels like it ought to be obvious, because if you
Right.
were trying to reduce anything in the health and human sciences down to one specific number, one particular measurement, and we try to say, well, this is the data point that now defines everything, you're always going to get into trouble.
Exactly.
I mean, it's why we as therapists used to use that idea of a GAF score, like a global
yeah.
assessment of functioning, and try and reduce people's health and wellness down to a singular number. And that's just never going to work. Human beings aren't data points. And so there's so much work to be done on addressing the whole person and looking at people as people rather than some singular metric.
Oh, absolutely. And how can we say that that one data point applies to everybody?
Sure, yeah.
There's nobody who's the same. Even a tall, skinny white person, not two people are the same. Looking at genetics, looking at their lifestyle, environment, just so many different factors play into that. We can't say one set of data applies for everybody. That's bullshit. It doesn't work. And the fact that it is still continuously used today just goes to show that it's a power play to keep oppressed people oppressed so that they will, do anything and everything from the diets and the exercising and all these things that can be very unhealthy for them because of the way that they are shamed about it.
Right, right. So then a lot of the work that needs to be done here is not just that typical, therapist-y thing
Right.
that we do of love yourself. It's actually about dispelling those bogus cultural assumptions and really talking about the larger picture about how we as a society conceptualize weight. Can you talk to us a little bit about the fat liberation movement and how that plays into all of this?
Absolutely. I love the fat liberation movement because it's doing exactly that. It is trying to dispel these things that we've been told for so long. What's really cool about the fat liberation movement is the fat liberation movement actually came from the body positive movement, which came from the feminist movement.
Okay.
So the feminist movement.
Yeah, thank you. Walk us through that chain of logic.
I know. Everybody's probably going, wait, what? Tell me a little bit more about that. So with the feminist movement, that was really geared towards, helping women be seen, be heard, get to this place of equality through a number of different ways. It started with women, then it really, really moved out to LGBTQ plus, BIPOC individuals, and other marginalized communities. With that movement geared towards really trying to fight for equality and so forth, it really found that people of different body sizes were also constantly being oppressed as well. And so it kind of just was we're mama, we're going to take you under our wing and we're going to take care of you because we want people to see you and to be validated, to be heard, to be advocated for, and for people to say, your body is just as good as anybody else's body. So with the body positivity movement, this is really geared towards the, self-love, the positive talking, the, accepting your body for as it is.
There's no way you should look.
Exactly.
You should look like you, and that's beautiful in its own right.
Right. Whether you're skinny, fat, or anywhere in between, you are beautiful just the way you are, which I absolutely love. I think that's a very important message that we need to start from a very young age and throughout the rest of our life. However, that's not enough. We can sit there and we can work with clients about loving themselves, their bodies, the way that their bodies interact with the world and so forth. But things are not going to change unless we change the system.
Okay, so your body is beautiful isn't a sufficient message when you have all of these large-scale and culturally spread forms of oppression.
Exactly. We can do things on a micro scale and really, really help the individual. But if we could do things on that macro scale and really change the system, the culture, the views, then we don't have to keep doing the body positivity stuff.
Fair to say.
Yeah, exactly. And so that's why fat liberation is really kind of this newer wave of education, advocacy work, fighting in places like the medical field for people to change their data set points and to understand that there's so many different factors to take into consideration that affects a person's body size. And that's why we see fat liberation as a really big thing right now, with millennial, Gen Zers, and people who are saying, like, enough is enough, right? We're not going to keep doing this anymore.
Well, I mean, it turns out when you allow people growing up to see more than just like straight white cis het couples on TV, that they begin to get some ideas about how it's okay to be you.
Exactly. I mean, I can remember growing up myself and never really seeing a fat queer person on TV, magazines, movies, or anything like that.
If there is a fat person, they're the sidekick and they're the butt of the joke.
Exactly. And that's not fair or right. A fat person should not be made fun of just because of their size at all. Like, that's not what we're here about. That's shaming. That is judgmental. And it really hurts a person and does way more damage to them than a lot of people realize.
Yeah. Well, so then what are some of the like bigger systemic oppression kind of things? We've talked a little bit about like medical access. Clearly there is social pressure and peer judgment. But what are those like less interpersonal and more systemic oppressors that we should be thinking about?
Yeah, so you actually see fat oppression happen in so many different fields. For example, just employment. I'm really bad with statistics, y'all. I'm not good with numbers, but I can tell you, if you go and look at the studies and you see fat oppression, you actually see higher rates of fat people in work who are actually getting passed over for raises, for mobility of movement up in the company. You actually see a lot of more skinnier people who are put in front of the camera or the pictures or advertising and things like that because it's more quote unquote appealing. And just think about what that does to the work environment and what it does to fat people there. It says you're never going to be good enough.
Yeah.
So we see that in employment. We also see this in fashion. Fashion models are always tall and skinny. We never see a full-figured fat person. And because that's something that is so commonly seen in social media, TV, music, movies, and so forth, we're surrounded by it. That message is constantly saying, you're not enough. You can't be more than, a person sitting at a desk. You could never be a model because you're not pretty enough.
Right.
Yeah. Let's see, where else do we see it? Clothing, oh my goodness. As a fat person, I hate shopping because finding clothes that fit me, one, they're never cute. I can never find any cute shit to wear. Two, it's expensive. Buying an extra large, double XL, 5XL shirt or something like that, you're always tacking on $2, $3, $4 extra dollars for it. When if you really look at how much it costs to make those things, it's cents. So why are we charging fat-bodied people more money when you charge skinny-bodied people less money for clothes?
Yeah, so it's something like the pink tax. Like if something is directly marketed towards women, we will jack the price up on it because what are they going to do about it?
Exactly. And so you see this happen all over the place. And again, it's very shaming. I know I have felt extremely uncomfortable shopping in person, trying to ask somebody for my size pants, my size shirt, or anything like that. And the looks that I get, oh my goodness. If looks could kill, let me tell you. And not just from, clientele who are shopping there, but from the workers as well. Yeah. And so being able to remove that type of stigma in the fashion, clothes industry can really help improve people's self-esteem, self-worth, self-value.
Do you feel like we are making any movement in that direction? I mean, it seems like every 3 or 6 months you'll see some big news story about how, Victoria's Secret hired a plus-size model, and everybody gets all excited about it. Is that just like the way we sort of rainbow color all of the corporations every summer, or does that feel like meaningful progress?
It depends on who you ask.
Sure, fair to say, yeah.
I do believe that we are making good strides. Good strides are going to be slow. I don't think that we're going to have overnight changes. I do love seeing, different companies who take on and have models who are of all body shapes, all colors and so forth be represented because it's very empowering. Is that everywhere? Absolutely not.
Sure.
We've got a lot more to do, but I think there is a slow progression. I think what's important are therapists, are social workers, are people who are spreading education and advocacy around fat liberation to continue to make those changes.
Yeah. I mean, this very much is a cultural problem.
100%.
I think people so often attribute to genetics or to evolution these things that are not necessarily ingrained, but that are rather culturally constructed. I can just imagine people watching this saying, well, we evolved to think that this particular body type was going to be the most fertile and therefore the most attractive. But I don't really feel like that holds up when we start looking at various cultures. Is that fair to say?
Yeah. I mean, let me tell you, I can't tell you how much, outside of the U.S. alone, we see, fat bodies as very much put on a pedestal, right? Fat bodies are seen as beautiful, as fertile, as, something to, look forward to and to enjoy and celebrate. Whereas here in the U.S., not so much. And because of the things of people's culture, society, social media and whatnot, it continues to downplay things like that and really, really continue to stress that tall, skinny is what's the best.
Tall, skinny, white, European. I mean,
yes, exactly.
It all gets folded into that same kind of colonialist notion.
Oh, 100%. Exactly. And to be able to make those changes, as we're talking about, we need people who are doing the fat liberation work in all aspects. Not just what we're talking about, like medical, movies, fashion, etc., but even when it comes to things like legal, making sure that people are not being fired for just being fat.
Sure, yeah.
Right? I mean, in the state of Texas, for the longest time, you could be fired for just being gay, and, they don't have to give you any cause or any reason, right? Same thing. There's not protections for fat people. Somebody could just fire me just because. And that's not right.
Yeah, fair to say. Well, I'll go ahead and mention that I know y'all have opinions. I see you talking about this in the chat, and I would really love to encourage you to give us a call. Again, we're at 512-991-9242. If you think that this is all total bullshit, call and tell us about it. I mean, this is a important topic, so correct us where we're wrong and let us know what you think about this, because I know that it is so contrary to the culture in so many ways, but is sincerely important ideas for us to be talking about.
Absolutely, 100%. And, even though I find myself as an educator, an advocate, and an expert in this area, I'm always still learning and growing.
Sure.
So having these types of conversations with you and other people is important. These conversations is what stimulates any type of change.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's taken generations to do this, but as a culture, I feel like we've finally come around to the idea that being queer doesn't make you sick in some way, but being queer in a homophobic culture is kind of universally traumatizing. So as a therapist who in particular works with fat people, can you talk at all about some of the symptomology, some of the struggles that you are seeing in people?
Oh, absolutely. Being a fat person in a quote-unquote skinny world, even though if you statistically look, fat people are the quote-unquote normal size, the size that we see every day, but that's not talked about. But being a fat person in a skinny world, I mean, what that ends up doing to people is creating these, identity issues of, people not loving themselves, people dealing with anxiety or depression when they're around people who are skinny, or people who are at a store or at a club and whatnot. They get very self-conscious of themselves. And that can even go further from there and turn into things like addiction. We see people dealing with, addiction when it comes to exercising, addiction when it comes to, diets and fad diets and things like that. We also see people dealing with things like eating disorders because of it. Anywhere from just disordered eating, emotional eating. We're all kind of guilty of emotional eating, but it can go from anywhere from that to something much more severe like bulimia, anorexia, and things like that.
Yeah.
And because of that, people completely change their lives. Who they are, what they do, the way they interact with the world around them. And that's because we're a fat person living in a skinny world. Just that culture in and of itself can do all that to a person.
Yeah, well, I think it's important to take a moment here to just acknowledge that whatever the healthiest weight for you actually is, that it is much healthier to be at a weight, even if it is above where maybe your genetic set point would be at its most healthiest. It's better to be over that point than to be bouncing up and down. And it's dramatically better to be overweight than underweight. I mean, is all that fair to say?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I think a big part of looking into working with individuals who deal with, you know, the weight issues is not only are we looking at culture, society, and everything like that, but we also have to look directly at home, you know, how a person was raised, what a person was told, and those things directly affect a person, their views on weight, their ideas about food and exercise and so forth. And then therefore that causes the underweight, extreme overweight, or anything in between.
Or the bouncing back and forth as you like get on that diet and then you finally get to the weight that you're supposed to be at. But that should is really missing the point, especially since your body is that rubber band that's going to naturally settle back at that set point. At least if you're not stretching that rubber band out too much by changing your weight over and over again.
Oh, 100%. Exactly. And people have a tendency to not realize that or think about that. We naturally are going to gain and lose weight all throughout our life, but based off of lifestyles, what we're doing, our opportunities that are afforded to us, the opportunities we don't have, and just a number of other things. And so when people can stop for a moment and think about that from that type of perspective, it really brings new light to everything.
Sure. Well, I mean, everybody's personal pain, everybody's story is going to be different. But in general, when you're working with fat folks on body acceptance, is it meaningfully different than working with other types of body dysmorphia or other forms of acceptance issues?
Yeah, I know for myself, when I work with other fat folks on body positivity, fat liberation, or anything revolved around that, for me, it is very meaningful and very different because I can really relate and I can really understand what they're doing, going through, feeling, and so forth. Whereas if I'm working with a person who is in a skinny body, it's a little bit different, but I still understand where they're coming from.
Sure.
And no matter what, if I'm working with somebody who is in a skinny body or in a fat body, you know, I always take that slow approach of acceptance, love, empathy, and understanding why we are the way we are because of the things around us. And so we have to start small. We have to start slow. We have to understand that this is a journey. This isn't just like a 100-meter race. Is that a short race? I don't know. I'm not a runner. But like, you know, this is something that takes time. We have to undo all of these years of oppression, shame, and judgment. And so no matter who you work with as a therapist, we just have to start with where they're at and just take that slow ride with them.
Yeah, fair to say. So I kind of use the terms almost interchangeably just now, but can you walk us through a little bit of the distinction between dysphoria, dysmorphia, and just sort of like general self-loathing or self-criticism?
Yeah, so like self-criticism is just, you know, the way I see it is just kind of you're looking past a mirror and you're just like, oh, I don't like the way my hair looks, or I don't like the way this fits on my clothes or anything like that. That's just general self-criticism. Where it goes beyond that is body dysmorphia, which just to kind of provide a little bit of an overview for everybody, body dysmorphia is more the diagnosis of a person who is dealing with extreme issues around weight. Body dysphoria is the actual feeling that a person gets.
Okay, sure.
So the feeling of like
that sensation, that
uncomfortable,
personal experience.
sensation. Yeah, exactly. And so when people are talking about like, I feel really weird in my body, that's body dysphoria. When people are doing the extreme weight loss, the extreme exercising and things like that, that's body dysmorphia.
Okay. Well, and then just broadly speaking, what does treatment generally look like?
Ooh, so treatment, as you know, for any person we work with, it's going to be very highly individualized.
Sure.
It's always meeting a person where they're at, and taking that person-centered approach is going to be super important. Also, I think what a lot of therapists need to remember is it's not just about the body and weight. There's so much more added into it. So understanding intersectional identities, how a person's culture, genetics, home life, sexual orientation, religion, everything ties into that. And so I think that as a therapist, I take that approach of when I'm working with this individual, I need to be able to understand all those aspects of them and how it affects their ideas, understanding of weight.
Sure.
And then from there, usually most of the times I really start more towards body positivity, because a lot of people are not at a place where they're ready for fat liberation, or maybe they just don't want to do that. Maybe they just want to have more of that body love. And so I usually start at that place and work with the person on changing their language, how they talk to themselves, how they talk to others. I usually work with people on understanding how society or their family or their environment around them gives them those unhealthy ideas.
Yeah, what those social pressures look like,
Exactly.
and how to recognize them as they happen and not necessarily
Exactly.
become consumed by them.
100%, exactly. And then from there, once we get to a place where a person starts to have more body positivity and see themselves in a better light, if they want to take that next step into fat liberation, that's when we talk about systems of oppression, how they do things, how to be able to fight that, and whatnot. And so, again, it's a slow process. I know for myself, this is a journey I've been on my entire life. I continue to do it with my own therapist because society is very difficult. Again, a fat person living in a skinny world, sometimes it can feel very alone. But as I continue to do my journey, I share that with others, specifically my clients when therapeutically appropriate. And it makes a big difference to make that connection. The connection is really key in this relationship when working on body image.
Well, we do have a couple of brave callers on the line, so
Yay.
I want to get to the phones here in just a moment. But before we do, let's take a quick look and see what's been going on around the rest of the ACA.
What do people mean by this term alpha male?
The term is misappropriated from wolves having an alpha male in the pack, which it turns out is not true. But even so, people aren't wolves. So it wouldn't really have mattered.
Science checks out, yeah.
And they have this idea in the metaphysical market right now that if you have a piece of shungite and you put it by your computer, it'll suck up all the EMF waves so it doesn't affect your health.
Faith is not a reliable pathway to truth, and we can a lot of stuff up relying on faith.
Oh, trust. If somebody quotes to me a Hebrews 1:11, 11:1 one more time, I swear I will stab myself in the right eye.
We're not focusing in this conversation about the politics or the emotions or the philosophical ramifications of transgender people in sports. We're actually talking about the science.
Even if you could prove it to me, I would be the first one to say you're right, and I would no longer be an atheist. But I would still be right here on this show telling everybody that God is not worthy of worship. The God of the Bible, the God of the Quran, the God of these religions is a monster. And if he's real, I am his enemy.
All right, well, let's kick it off with Will in Indiana, who wants to talk a little bit about the barriers to sexuality because of size. Will, tell us what's on your mind tonight.
Well, I was just cooking dinner and I saw the topic and I knew I had to call in. I am 43 years old. I consider myself a demigirl, and I am over 600 pounds, and I have been fighting weight my entire life. It's affected every facet of my life, particularly my relationships with with the opposite sex, which I am feminine attracted, to the point where it's caused such a. Well, let me put it this way: I remember being in high school and in the crunch of all the people walking through the hallways, right? Girls would shriek in revulsion that they touched me. And that has kind of stayed with me ever since. Yeah. And finding my weight as I have, it does cause a lot of, negative body image problems. And when I get into a relationship, a lot of times I'll get too comfortable in relationships where my weight kind of spirals out of control a little bit, because we like sitting around being fat and happy together, but then the fat doesn't get so happy and it inevitably falls apart. And I just kind of wanted to give a unique perspective from a person that is super obese. I have comorbidities that really prevent me from having a normal sex life, because I have a hanging panis or paniculus that covers my pubic bone. So I can't really relate with any couple, and not to mention that, but I've also got this large unattractive lobe of lymphedema in the lower right quadrant of my thigh, and I think we really do talk about body positivity more, and start trying to train, maybe not train, but I don't know, guide children and teenagers and such more to kind of be more kind, more accepting.
Yeah. I mean, to that end, do you feel at all that there's reason for hope right now? I guess on a macro level, you said that these are issues and ideas that have been with you your entire life. Do you feel like the culture is moving in the right direction? Somewhat
with movements like the Healthy at Every Size movement, because I can tell you, even though I am, getting up there in age, and just by my standards, and with all the stuff that I've got going on with my body, I pretty much say I'm the healthiest fat guy you'd ever meet. And, I have no type 2 diabetes, no high blood pressure, no high cholesterol, no neuropathy to speak of, a little bit, but not terrible.
Yeah, and yet the assumption is that there is this huge medical concern, whereas plenty of other folks might be walking down the street very close to dying of lung cancer, of pancreatic cancer. I mean, all of these different kinds of things that are so invisible. But we put all of that stigma, I don't even want to say on the wrong people, because maybe we just shouldn't be stigmatizing people's bodies and their health. But there is a assumption that your size is going to be a determining factor in all of these things. And I don't mean to put words in your mouth, Willis, but it sounds like that hasn't been your experience.
Yeah, it's very true. Yeah, there are people who do assume things about you, when you are a certain size, or honestly, they assume more about your eating habits more than anything. I probably consume less than your average 40-year-old guy, a 40-something-year-old guy. And even through my teenagers, I know I consumed less than any of my friends did. And it's just that my lifestyle was so sedentary, and I didn't have, the socioeconomic advantages that the rest of my friends did. And that's what, kind of caused this. I think where it all stemmed from was that I think I was too smart for my own good, not to toot my own. I mean, it sounds like I'm tooting my own horn, but I'm really not. When normal kids would get up and do the monkey bars, right, if they would fall, they'd get up, dust themselves off, say whatever, and do it again, right? No. When I got up and did the monkey bars and failed, I immediately associated my brain with failure, shame, and pain.
Sure.
And my brain just clicked over and said, well, clearly I'm never to do that ever again. And so I didn't.
So this isn't like some terrible moral failing, but a like larger issue of access and opportunity, and again, keep using this word, but culture.
Yeah, indeed. Related to culture, and I am an espouser of the healthy at every size thing, but I think we've really got to radically alter the way we treat obesity, especially super obesity, because you look at any other chronic disease like addiction or cancer or something like that, and it is aggressively treated with every facet of medical technology. And yet when you get to a super obese level, which can cause, as it is me, causing comorbidities that are really hard and challenging to overcome, I mean, it becomes a Sisyphean task.
You get a finger wag rather than good medical care.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And if I could ever get to a weight where I can start getting more mobile again and get out and, maybe do some speaking or something like that, my mantra is always going to be, or my sting, at the end of each one of my, if I give a talk or something, I'm going to say that if we don't start aggressively treating super obesity, the only thing that is ever going to change is how much their loved ones bury.
I hear that. I'm sorry to hear about your experiences, but I really appreciate you giving us a call tonight. Was there anything else in particular that you wanted to make sure to let the audience know, or that you'd like to ask of us before we move on to the next call?
Maybe not for this call, but I'll probably call in sometime in the future.
Sure. Well, we would love to hear from you, and I really appreciate you being brave enough to give us a call and to share your story tonight.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
It was an honor to talk to you both.
Appreciate
Thank you.
Yeah, so this is heavy material for a lot of people. This is a meaningful part of life.
Absolutely. And the fact that, he really hit the idea of like, we need to start this from a very young age because, when he was young, when I was young and we were bullied because of our size, it sticks with you for so long.
I hear that.
And so being able to, stop bullying and create better language and understanding from a young age and what that can do for a person, the people around them, and society in the long run is such a big thing.
Yeah, fair to say. Well, let's talk to Mr. Krabs in Maryland. Mr. Krabs, what's on your mind tonight?
Hey, Christy. Hey, JP. So, yeah, I have a little bit of a kind of a dissenting opinion on this because just like the last caller, I'm a bit of an overweight guy myself. I'm about 330 pounds, but only average height. And I haven't always been this way. I have, growing up, I was heavy. I was husky, as the polite term was in the 80s. And then, when I went into the military, I obviously had to lose a lot of weight in order to make standards. Toward the end of my military career, it was, difficult to keep those weight standards. And I eventually was processed out because I fell out of standards. And, then being out of the military, trying to get jobs here and there. And I let things go. Pandemic happened and I really, really let things go.
Sure.
To the point where, just going down the street a little bit, I'm way out of breath. I'm dripping sweat. And while I do think I have a better body positive image than say some other people within my weight class and all that, I'm concerned that it almost seems like, okay, let's go ahead and bury our heads in the sand and not realize what we are. Like, I think people should know themselves, know their body, know when they're healthy and not, but that there is a line. And it's not a hard line, okay, because everybody is different. And that we shouldn't necessarily just say, well, everybody is good at any weight. And it's like, if it's affecting your health, if it's affecting your quality of life, then no, that's not necessarily as good.
Right. And I think that you are helping to clear up a misconception here, because I don't actually know that we are in disagreement. I will say for myself, there is a particular number that feels right in my body, and I've been rather consistent at that weight for a long time, but I know that I have dipped well below it and well above it at various points, and that has not felt good in a number of different ways, and there are certainly much more extreme versions of that idea. It's not to suggest that any individual person can just weigh whatever they want, that they can just choose whatever they want to look like. I mean, yeah, I do support people's autonomy in that sense, but that's not to say that it's like healthy for everybody to be at any size. It's to say that each person is going to have their own size, and there's not a single size that we should all be aspiring to. And so often we assume that somebody is unhealthy because they're fat, when in reality they can be incredibly healthy at that weight that might be different from what would be healthy for me, healthy for JP, healthy for Mr. Krabs. I mean, is that all fair to say? What would you add to that?
Absolutely. And I agree with you that, when you said during COVID, you gained weight. I did too. I gained about 30 pounds during COVID due to the fact that I was working from home, I was less active, and a number of things. And I can tell in my body how that really affects my movement, my abilities, and things like that. And so you're right, there are certain numbers that feel better or work better, but it's kind of geared towards letting the person decide that for themselves, and we don't have to fit in one body. Just like Christy was saying, we don't have to be one size.
There's a different healthy weight set point for every individual, and you can't discern that by looking at somebody, or by measuring their BMI.
100%. Like for example, several years ago, I was really big into fitness. I was doing obstacle course races and things like that, and I was a bigger fat person doing it, and I felt great. Let me tell you, running, jumping over shit, and all that was just exhilarating, and I had a great time. And I could do that as a fat body, and I felt good, I felt healthy, I felt great about the way that I was, seeing myself. But that's what worked for me in that moment of my life. And just like you're talking about, what works for you is maybe a different number. That's where you feel better. And that's exactly what we're talking about. Feeling better, feeling good about what you can do, feeling good about the way you see yourself and so forth. But we just don't fit in one number, one size.
Right. So, Mr. Krabs, I guess the idea then is that, if you feel like you are over the weight that's healthiest for you, and, of course, if you are working with your doctor and these kinds of ideas, then perhaps it would be in your best interest to work towards losing weight. The things that we said previously, I think still apply. Healthier to be overweight than underweight, healthier to be at a stable weight than one that is constantly yo-yoing. But if you've picked up some extra pounds over the past couple of years, and that's had a detrimental effect on your health, by all means, do something about that to the best of your ability, knowing that heaping on a bunch of shame and inwardly pointed aggression, knowing that having a bunch of social pressure and obligation attached to it is not going to be in your best interest. How does all of that land with you?
Oh, and I definitely agree with that. I mean, because I see things like that, things like your weight, things that may not necessarily be fully in your control, as similar to something like, having a scar or some other kind of permanent disfigurement that, nobody who isn't you really should be telling you, unless, of course, again, you're working with your doctor and you're trying to be the healthiest and happiest that you want to be. So, I mean, that's one of my concerns, because earlier it almost sounds like, forget what anybody else says, forget, oh, the numbers don't matter and this, that, and the other thing, because it can, if you're with your partner, if you have one, or if you're trying to get one, and there's certain things that you cannot do that you want to do with a partner, then yeah, that can definitely ruin your quality of life.
Sure.
And then you should take a good hard look at your life and be like, okay, why is this? Why am I doing this? Why am I allowing myself to just blindly say, well, there's nothing I can do? Because in some cases there might not be something you can do. In some cases there might be something that you can do. I just the idea of just saying, oh, well, you're not healthy, or oh, you just are healthy. Dealing with either one of those absolutes, I think, is actually less healthy than anything else.
Yeah, no, that's fair to say. Health is not a yes or no question by any means. And what is healthy for you? What are your goals? What's important to you? I can say for myself, if I were to, because of some change in my body, lose my ability to go for a run or to hike with my partner, that would have a huge effect, not just on my weight, my caloric intake, and those sorts of things, but on my quality of life. I mean, those are things that I desperately enjoy. I rely on them to ground me with my body, to connect with nature, to connect with my partner. I mean, all of these different types of things. And so if I were to find myself, wanting to kind of slack off on going for a run every once in a while, I mean, that's fine, but that will eventually, for me, lead to a negative lifestyle. And I want everybody to be healthy, regardless of what size they're at. And if that means working with a nutritionist, with, taking on a professional trainer and more exercise, working with a doctor, by all means, be healthy. The message here is not to be careless about all of that. The message here is that we from the outside cannot determine your level of health based strictly by your weight. And we have a huge habit of doing that as a society. And we've even built in really problematic versions of that philosophy into our medical establishment, into things like job access and all of this sort of stuff. So it's not to say that anybody can be healthy at any size. It's that anybody can be healthy, and there's a right size for them that we don't get to just be careless dicks about from the outside.
Right, exactly. And, thinking about, what you're wanting for yourself and your body, I would support you 110%. If this is what's going to make you feel healthy, if this is what's going to make you feel happy, do it. What I would want to make sure that you, and the way that you interact with the world, is understanding that everybody around you does not get to dictate that for you. You do. You decide what's best for you. You decide what's best for your body. And that's what I really want for everybody. To be happy, to be healthy in whatever way that looks for you, but to not let society and everybody else tell you otherwise.
Oh, I've given up on caring what society thinks about me years ago.
Yes!
There's no two words.
Good.
No worries about that. But after this show, I am definitely planning on spending some quality time with my rowing machine, just because I do want to get healthy. For no other reason that my partner wants to keep me around for reasons that I still don't quite understand.
Yeah, well, fair enough. I hope that this has been encouraging on some level, and we would definitely say that as you are going about that process, just know that that whole idea of looking at yourself in the mirror and saying, you got to fix this, there's a problem, that type of inwardly pointed aggression is not part of the solution. So I hope that you will accept yourself as you are, even as you are working towards change, as Carl Rogers said.
Exactly.
So, thank you so much for calling, and best of luck.
Yeah, thank you, and thank you for all those clarifications. I think that definitely helps so much more.
Hey, we're glad to hear it. Appreciate you giving us a call. You have a great night. All right. Well, after being a little bit maybe anxious, we've got a good number of calls coming in. What do you say we keep it rolling and talk to Everett in Michigan? Everett, tell us your story.
Hi. Recently, the first time since a long time, somebody told me that I was fat, and tried to say it in a way of hey, if you keep going down this route, you might get health problems.
Mm-hmm.
And it was my grandmother.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, how did that land with you? What was the experience like?
Initially, I was like, Gran, what the heck? How could you do this?
Yeah.
She just pulled me aside and she didn't yell it out loud, but she was like, hey, you're starting to go down a bad route. And I was like, I'm not at a dangerously, great weight.
Mm-hmm.
According to BMI scores, I'm slightly in danger of being overweight, but I'm definitely not completely overweight,
Mm-hmm. And it sounds to me, it sounds like the way that, Grandma was coming across was not the most supportive, but it sounds like Grandma was really just trying to say, I want to make sure you're good.
Sure. Yeah.
I want to make sure you're going to be okay. Unfortunately, it was just the way that it was delivered, really came across in the wrong way. And so I can definitely understand. I've had family say that to myself as well. How that really, really makes you feel on the inside. The message is typically really trying to be good, just didn't hit the right mark though. And so I'm sorry that happened to you. But again, just like we were talking about with the last callers, if you feel good in your body, if you feel like you're able to do the things that you want to do and you're happy with that, that's what's most important. Other people are always going to have thoughts, opinions, and so forth, but ultimately it's your decision on what you want to do for yourself.
Also, I wanted to share some little strategies that helped me with my own self-image.
Oh, yes, please do.
So the first one is think about how certain personal attributes would be beneficial in multiple situations. For example, extra body fat. If you find a situation where you don't have as much food around, you fell out of a plane or something, you're going to survive a lot longer.
Sure.
Also, increase snuggling abilities.
Oh, yes. Us bigger body folks, us fat folks, we are good cuddlers.
Keep a blanket warm. Sure.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, well, I am sorry that you had that experience. I recognize that, especially in our families, we are so comfortable commenting on one another's appearance and commenting particularly on one another's weight, which is, it's problematic for so many reasons. Again, because we do try and force that association with health, which may or may not be appropriate. I mean, it is fair to say that if you are, for instance, struggling with significant depression, you may see a major change in your weight, and that weight change might be potentially an indication that there's something going on with your mental health. But making that assumption from the outside and then going and poking on it in such a careless and casual way can be really damning.
Oh, absolutely. And these are people who, are supposed to, feel like love us unconditionally, right? These are people who are supposed to protect us and keep us safe and whatnot. And then when we get that kind of message, we're like, whoa. That's not what you're supposed to do. And it really starts to kind of change your view on things. And that could be really, really hard. And again, sorry that was your experience. But again, if you're feeling good in your body, if you feel like you can do the things that you want to do, if you're happy, that's what matters most.
So I appreciate that you're working to make those changes. Anything else you wanted to add tonight?
I also have another skill that I'm primarily used with my face, and it's kind of a funny one.
Okay.
But I would imagine did you not hear me?
No, I'm sorry. Please go ahead. We just wanted to hear that skill before we start to wrap up the show for the night.
Okay, so I would imagine like a drag queen pick me up. Like a drag queen would be, I would imagine like a really nice drag queen, like telling me about like my different insecurities were like fine in like different little ways.
Yeah, you kind of imagine a particular figure, kind of that like internal family systems model of having these different aspects of your personality tell you the thing that you need to hear. I actually really appreciate that visualization and that strategy, and I'm so glad that you found it.
And let me tell you, a drag queen will always be somebody who can make you feel so good about yourself. And so having that as kind of your inner voice or whatever you want to call it, I think is lovely.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Absolutely. You have a great night. Thank you so much for giving us a call.
You have a good one.
Yeah, so Everett had some good ideas. Are there any other, I don't know, particular strategies, exercises? I mean, we're getting a little bit long on the show, but I didn't want to walk away from any of this without having spent some time talking about what we can do to change our relationships with our bodies and maybe to change our views towards society when we look at other people's bodies. What would you recommend?
Absolutely. One of the simplest things that I work with people on doing is changing just their language. If you say to yourself, I'm unlovable, I'm disgusting, or things like that, ask yourself, would you say that to somebody else? Typically, the answer is going to be no, right? I'm not going to say that to somebody. Why would I then say that to myself?
So sort of that Kristen Neff idea of it's so much easier to be kind and generous towards ourselves or towards other people than it is to ourselves. Sure.
Exactly. And so taking that approach can be really, really helpful. I'm also a really big believer of like using mantras, positive self-talk, just having little statements that you can tell yourself on the regular that can give you that little pick-me-up. The other thing that I use with folks is if you have a picture of yourself when you were a child or a teenager or whenever, just when you were younger, would you talk to that child or that teenager that way?
Sure, yeah.
Right? Would you tell them that message that's going to stick with them for probably the rest of their life? Most of the time, people say no. And so I always tell people, whenever you're thinking of saying something mean to yourself, think of that child that you were, that teenager. Don't tell them that. Because you don't want them to experience the things that you've experienced. You want them to live a happy, healthy life, of whatever that is. And so making sure that we don't talk to our younger self about that then helps us create a more positive experience now. And a lot of times too, I always tell people, talk positive to yourself in the mirror. There's something about looking at yourself in the mirror, seeing yourself, hearing yourself. It really, really kind of sinks in your soul and really makes you feel much better about yourself when you can say those good things to yourself.
Yeah. I worry I've also sat in that therapy room and recommended these kinds of ideas. And I know that when people first hear them, it's so easy to dismiss it.
100%.
Right? And I liken it to when I've worked with a physical therapist. Like oftentimes you'll go in and they'll tell you like, okay, so we need you to do this exercise where you just, lift your leg up and then put it down and lift it up and put it down. And it's so easy to be like, well, how is this like really fixing anything? And then you go back for your follow-up appointment. They're like, you didn't do your exercises, did you? And you're like, that exercise doesn't do anything. And then you actually force yourself to go through the motions and to do the damn thing. And lo and behold, the experts actually had something there. Like there really is power in these things that might make you feel a little silly or might be kind of challenging to try.
Oh, 100%. Every client that I tell that to, they're always like, you want me to do what?
Yeah.
Like, are you serious? And I'm like, I know it sounds ridiculous. Like, I know, but just try it. Most of the time when clients come back after they've been using it for days, weeks, months, you start to see a big difference in the way they talk to themselves, the way that they treat themselves, the way that they view the world. I mean, everything. It really does make a big difference.
Yeah, no doubt, no doubt. So what should we be then doing to try and make a more body positive world for others?
Oh my goodness. Language is always a big thing.
Sure.
But also I think taking some time to understand the education around these systems of oppression and how they keep people oppressed. A lot of the times we don't really kind of take that deeper exploration. And I think that's really important to understand because these systems are set up to support these other systems, which then keep people down.
Yeah.
So education, doing advocacy work is always very important. I think that when people can talk to legislators, when people can talk to medical providers, when people can talk to therapists and other people like that, and explain these systems and explain the things that it does to people mentally, physically, emotionally, and everything else, we then start to see that change that we're looking for.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely don't want to talk out of both sides of my mouth and say that folks should listen to their doctor, but also argue with their doctor,
Right.
and listen to the experts, but also But I recognize that it's a really challenging place because there are so many people who find themselves in that exam room and being faced with a lot of these really flawed ideas. So I guess part of being prepared for that is just recognizing where the flaws are.
Absolutely. And I think something that's really important is recognizing, yes, systems are flawed. Yes, systems, have these things set in place that kind of keep oppression happen, but there's also good people in those systems who are trying to fight and educate and advocate. And looking for those people is going to be very important. So finding a doctor who is focused on health at every size, finding a doctor who is very inclusive of BIPOC individuals and other marginalized communities makes a really big difference. So there are the good people there. I just always encourage people, look at their bios, look at their reviews, find those people who are there who can help you make a difference.
Well, I mean, outside of our personal education and I suppose educating those around us, I heard you talking about, talking to legislators and things like this. For those of us who aren't going to storm Congress, what are the advocacy and activism opportunities? I mean, what should we be a part of?
Oh goodness. So I'm going to be just completely honest. I'm still learning a lot about that too.
Sure.
Politics and whatnot is not my forte. But some of the basic things that you can do is first, get out and vote. Voting makes such a big difference, especially when you have people who are doing the work of advocating, educating people when it comes to fat liberation.
Sure.
So find those people, learn about
them. I think
them.
a big part of that vote, I guess I just want to throw in, is voting in legislators that recognize and value expertise.
Yes.
We live in a society right now that is so suspicious of anybody with a particular education, and we are coming in as outsiders, telling educators how they should be teaching in their classrooms, telling doctors what they should be doing in their exam rooms, rather than allowing the people who are responsible for managing those ideas to take them on.
100%. Looking at people who ask questions, right? Why is it? Why are we doing it like this? Why can't it be like this? What if we tried this, right? Those people who are going to be confident and brave and courageous to ask the questions of the current systems that are in place or the current people who are in place to say, why are we doing this and what do we need to do to make it change? Makes a really big difference.
Instead of coming in from the outside and hamstringing, for instance, as a therapist, I work with trans youth, and depending on who's in the AG's office and how that's being interpreted,
exactly.
I'm being told by these outsiders what is and is not good care by people who don't understand that. So I do think that voting is definitely something to really focus on.
Absolutely. Yeah, voting makes a big difference. Again, doing the education and around the different people who are in place, in power, and, not being afraid to write, make phone calls, show up at rallies and things like that, make your voice heard.
Yeah. Well, I know that we've kind of poked around the edges of this question in a couple of different ways, but to ask it again, I know that the Hayes model has been around since at least the early 60s, but it has seemed to pick up a lot of steam over the past decade. I mean, you talked about the younger generations and the body positivity movement. Do you feel like the culture is heading in the right direction?
Yes, I do. Again, kind of like I alluded to earlier, it's a slow process, but I think we are moving in the right direction. Just like we're moving in the right direction for fat liberation, we're moving in the right direction for, things like equality, when it comes to LGBTQ plus individuals, when it comes to Black African Americans, and just everything else. Yes, this time is very stressful, and yes, there's a lot going on in our world that's fighting against that. But we have a lot of people who are fighting for that. And so being able to join those movements, being able to make your voice heard, being able to come together can make a really big difference.
Yeah. Well, to that end, are there any resources, any podcasts, books, YouTubers, or anything that you'd like to recommend for folks to learn more?
Absolutely. So this is where I'm going to have to actually look at my list because I'm terrible with remembering names and everything.
Yeah.
Okay. So when it comes to website / and Instagram is Nalgona Positivity Pride. Other Instagram accounts are Your Fat Friend, Body Justice Therapist, The Fat Sex Therapist, I Heart Erica, Megan Jane Crab, Body Image with Bree, Dr. Von P. One of my favorite books that I recommend to everybody is The Body Is Not an Apology. Another book is Things No One Tells Fat Girls. And the last one, Fat. So... the Hayes community has a wonderful online presence as well. So definitely recommend joining those communities. Bodyimagemovement.com is another great resource as well. And some podcasts besides Secular Sexuality. Fierce Fatty Podcast, Body Liberation for All, Body Kindness, and She's All Fat are some of my favorite ones to recommend to people.
Yeah, well, and I suppose I will just reiterate that you and I are clinicians, right? We're not medical doctors, we're not nutritionists or these different sorts of folks. And so some of these questions, I have an understanding of the ideas as they apply. But when it comes to really diving into the science behind BMI and why that's problematic, when it comes to diving into the science of your weight set point and some of these things, I would encourage everybody to challenge us by actually reading the literature. I in particular really want to recommend just Health at Every Size by Linda Bacon, which is a incredible book that kind of summarizes so much of what we're talking about here.
Absolutely. There's so many online communities. There are so many in-person communities. There are so many things that are out there that I probably still don't even know about myself that can really help us understand the systems, challenge the systems, and, make some really good educated decisions.
Sure. Well, so tell us where people can find out more about you and about your work.
Sure, absolutely. So I have my own private practice here in Austin. I'm a virtual private practice. My private practice is called Health and Healing Hub. You can find me at healthandhealinghub.com. You can always email me at connect@healthandhealinghub.com as well. On my website, there's a form you can fill out if you want to look into getting services here in Texas. You can also just reach out if you have questions, need resources. I really try to make myself readily available for people. My website and my email is the best way to reach me.
Okay, well, glad to hear it. And, of course, folks can keep up with everything that's been going on with the ACA on our website, which is atheist-community.org. You can email me and all of the Secular Sexuality crew with sex@atheist-community, or email the ACA itself with tv@atheist-community.org. Of course, we are here live in the Free Thought Library, which is an incredible experience after having been shuttered for so long. It's been really a pleasure to get to actually hang out with the crew in person and to get to see people out in the audience. I myself am particularly excited because I will have this opportunity again on Sunday. This weekend, if you are watching this show live on Thursday, tomorrow, Truth Wanted is going to be live in the studio with Objectively Dan and Jamie. On Sunday, Talk Heathen is going to be Dan again with Forrest Valkai. And then the Atheist Experience will be Forrest and myself. So if anybody would like to get to meet me or disagree with me about the health at every size model or about, I don't know, about whether or not this jacket matches this shirt, I would just love to shake your hand, to hear your opinion. And so I really hope that folks will come and join us. Of course, all of the shows that I just mentioned can be found at tiny.cc/AEN podcast. That's a one-stop shop for audio versions of all of the shows. And we can keep this conversation going. There were so many different links and Instagram accounts and different things that JP was talking about. Let's get together and talk about some of those things to see how everybody feels, what everybody disagrees with, what everybody is being motivated by joining together in the Secular Sexuality Facebook fan group, where we will make sure to post a lot of these links and keep the conversation going. Of course, there's also tiny.cc/ACD Discord, which is a fan-run Discord community to talk about the shows of the ACA. And then I want to mention tiny.cc/merch ACA, where you can find all kinds of great products that help us keep the lights on, help us keep running this organization and serving the mission. We have some really wonderful products that I'd encourage you to check out. And now I'm very excited. We have a crew here live. We also have a crew kind of scattered across the country and perhaps around the world. I'm not sure who's on tonight, but I want to make sure to give a chance for them to get some recognition and to be seen. Thank you all so very much for everything that you've done. It's been really wonderful having this experience live in the studio. I know it's so much work to put these things together, and so I'm so grateful that like you and I were able to just sort of like hang out in here and chat a little bit while they do so much work to make us all look so good. So thank you so much to our crew. We do hope to see you this weekend. And, JP, before we start to wrap up, do you have any kind of final thoughts or last impressions that you want to leave with the audience tonight?
Yes. Don't let the conversation stop. If we let the conversation stop, we're not going to move forward. And so keep having these conversations with yourself, with friends, family, people around you. That way we can continue to educate, advocate, and support each other. And also remember that you are beautiful in whatever size body you are.
Well said. Well, I suppose I will take a page out of your book and just go ahead and encourage everybody, gay or straight, short or tall, fat or small, to go ahead and give themselves a big ol' orgasm. Or,
yes.
Better yet, give somebody else one.
Watch Talk Heathen live Sundays at 1 p.m. Central. Visit tiny.cc/YTTH and call into the show at 512-991-9242 or connect to the show online at tiny.cc/callth.